Hello, everyone. Let me start off by thanking each and every one of you for being here today. My name is Yadira Guzman, and I am the CHCI Housing Postgraduate Fellow. I am delighted to be here with you today for the Bridging Disparity Through Latino Economic Empowerment session. Latinos are a rapidly growing economic force in the United States, with our purchasing power estimated to be over $3 trillion. However, wealth disparities impacting our community continue to persist. In this country, a typical white family's median wealth is estimated to be about $188,000, compared to a Latino family's median wealth of about $36,000, a difference of about $152,000 less, which is why having these conversations on economic empowerment are so crucial for our community. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank MasterCard for their generous support of this session. And now to lead this incredibly important discussion, I am delighted to introduce our moderator, Emmy Reyes. Ms. Reyes is the Chief Executive Officer for the Latino Economic Development Center, an organization whose goal is to drive the economic and social advancement of low to moderate income Latinos and other underserved communities in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Puerto Rico. She joined LEDC in 2017 as a microfinance lending intern and swiftly assumed positions of increasing responsibility, including serving as Chief of Operations, Risk, and Investments, a champion for small businesses. Emmy chairs the Entrepreneurial and Food Jobs Working Group for Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser's Food Policy Council to support the growth of minority food businesses in low-income areas. Please join me in welcoming Emmy Reyes.
Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to be with you today. I'm used to feeling like I'm the youngest person in the room, and so it is very nice to be in a room seeing people much younger than me, just so much more far ahead. And so it is a true honor to be here, and I thank CHCI for inviting me to join you. It's so exciting to be joined by such phenomenal women to really have the session that brings it all together. So for the last 2 days, we've been talking about some very serious, heavy issues, and so I'm excited to be able to be here and really talk about bridging that disparity through Latino economic empowerment. And really our focus today is going to be on the wealth disparities that persist in our communities and the systemic barriers that hinder wealth accumulation, and some of the ways that our respective organizations have been working to address that. And so I'd like to first introduce my panel. And first, we're joined here by Luisa Godinez Puch, Equity Scholar and Senior Research Associate at the Urban Institute. Luisa's work focuses on two interconnected areas of research, both centered on racial and ethnic justice. The first is how state and local policies affect racial equity. The second centers on financial well-being for immigrant communities, particularly the role that tax benefits and financial inclusion play in underserved communities. So thank you, Luisa, for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Sabrina Terry. Sabrina is the Chief of Programs and Strategic Development for NCRC, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, who advocates for a more inclusive financial system for Latinos, including research and data analysts on the intersections of immigration policies, financial services, and wealth. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sabrina.
Thank you.
And lastly, I'd like to welcome Mercedes Garcia, whose biography is way longer than I have here, and so I have a very short version, but just an incredible asset to our community. She is the Vice President of Community Relations at MasterCard, responsible for developing relations with consumers, merchants, labor organizations, consumer advocacy groups, and governments through MasterCard's public education campaign, specifically the Master Your Card program, which is designed to help these constituents leverage the electronic payments technology. So thank you so much, Mercedes, for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and get started. So Luisa, if you don't mind really setting the foundation for us and talking about sort of what led to this wealth disparities that we're talking about today.
Absolutely. First, let me start by thanking you for the invitation. It is a true honor for me to be here sharing the panel with such fantastic women, and so honored to be speaking to the audience as well. So let me start by setting a little bit of context here. We Latinos are a community that is rapidly expanding. We are right now about 19% of the US population. At the same time, as was mentioned before, we are the fastest growing segment of economic contributors to the US economy. Right now, we contribute about 3.2 trillion to the nation's GDP. Yet, we know from the latest survey of consumer finance that the average white family makes about has about 5 times more wealth than the typical Latino family. And so the question is why? How are these two facts true at the same time, right? And so really, a line of previous work, as well as some of the work that we've done at Urban Institute, has shown us that unfortunately Latine, and let me pause quickly here, I often use the term Latine, although I also acknowledge that not everybody identifies with this term, but this is a term that I identify with, so please bear with me as I use this term. But the research that we've been doing at Urban really shows that we, the Latino community, still face a number of important structural barriers to accessing financial services, financial products, and really the financial system overall. And some of these barriers include still facing language and cultural barriers to accessing really basic products, right? Like there may be some products that are in Spanish, but then perhaps there aren't people that are able to service with cultural accuracy or even just the language Spanish our population. Very importantly, undocumented families are the ones that suffer the most because they oftentimes have to jump through specific hurdles unique to their circumstance. For instance, they have to meet very high ID requirements for opening a simple bank account. I'm not even talking about a credit card, I'm talking about a savings account, a debit card account, right? And the truth is that racism still remains an issue till this date for our community at large. A lot of folks that I've spoken to in my research have shown or have shared with me that they feel that they don't receive the same services and the same sort of products and attention that their white counterparts receive. Finally, we also know that income plays an important role in all of this. Latino households or families or consumers that are lower income tend to have a different relationship to savings and to spending behavior. And oftentimes, policy and products that are out there don't always reflect or don't always provide solutions for those types of, or those groups or segments of the Latino community. All of this creates deep issues of trust, as you may imagine. And the reality is that without, to have a functioning financial system requires to have the trust of every single group of the United States. And so even the banks will do better and the financial system will do better if every segment of its population trusts the system. And so right now we need to work very hard to really bridge these unique and structural barriers that our population is suffering in order to increase this trust and eventually positively affect the functioning of the financial system.
Thank you, completely agree. And Sabrina, related to that, given the interplay of race, ethnicity, and many of the factors that Luisa has mentioned, how has NCRC really tried to incorporate more of an intersectional approach into his work to address these barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start off by also thanking CHCI for inviting me to be on this great panel and among these esteemed women. It's truly an honor. NCRC is a national advocacy organization. It is a network leader, and we're focused on economic justice in BIPOC communities across the country. We're not a direct service provider, but our members, and many of our members are, they're community development organizations. So we really look at intersectionality as our responsibility for understanding the intersectionality of economic justice, economic empowerment, and working with our members to influence and hold decision makers accountable to really serving the needs of the community. And when I say different stakeholders or institutions, I'm talking about both public and private, because we believe that the only way to really address economic issues is by really taking an ecosystem approach. And so we start with our understanding of the issue. We know that we cannot just look at economic data and we cannot just engage economic actors to address economic issues, right? It's too intersectional for that. We know that health is directly related to economic stability, right? Medical debt is one of the leading causes of debt in the country. The more debt that someone has, the more difficult it is for them to be financially stable. We know that health issues are exacerbated in communities of color and Latino communities because we are either located on or next to environmental hazards. We know that those environmental hazards are then exacerbated by climate change, right? The storms that hit our community, right? That causes homeowners to have emergencies, that cause business owners to shut down for repairs. That also has an economic impact in our community. And then we layer that on top of the fact that our community has these intergenerational wealth divide. I say divide and not gap because it's not accidental. We have a divide that prohibits our community from being able to respond in the way that maybe our white counterparts can, right? We don't necessarily have the security blanket and the nest egg to draw back on like other communities do. Then you layer that on top of, right, immigrant families and individuals whose status may prohibit or limit the way that they're able to access resources. Their distrust for the system may make them, a little bit more reluctant to, reach out to or to receive those resources. And then we also look at like gender divides and gender gaps too, right, where women are paid less, but we have increased familial responsibilities. So, these are all of the things that we're trying to look at that we cannot understand if we're just looking at the data, and we cannot understand it from our comfortable chairs in Washington, D.C. We have to look at it by working with our members who are in community, serving the community, and trying to help families. So that's what we really see as our role. We see as our role is bringing some of this macro understanding of how government works, how financial institutions operate, some of that data, but really coupling it with their lived experience on the ground and using that together to develop strategies. But it doesn't stop there. That means that we also have to engage different types of institutions around economic empowerment. It's not just the responsibility of the banks. It's not just the responsibilities of the insurance companies. We have to have hospitals and health systems at the table. They can't just put up a farmer's market and think that that's going to increase the health of the community. We need you to invest in affordable housing, right? We need to have academic institutions involved in this. They are huge landowners in the community. They are also contributing to displacement. We need them at the table, right? We need these energy companies that are emitting these toxins into the community at the table, not just talking about how they're mitigating it, and put that in quotation marks, right? But also, what are you doing to ensure the economic viability of the community around you? So that's what I mean by an ecosystem of actors. It's not just NCRC and the people in Washington, it's our community members who are engaged in the fight, but it's also the different types of institutions who are present in communities and have a responsibility of assisting those communities become economically viable because it's in everyone's interest.
One of the important parts of that ecosystem is, of course, government, and your research focuses on conflicts between levels of government and preemption laws from a perspective on race and ethnicity. How would you say that the economic opportunities and governance structures impact outcomes for the Latino communities?
Yes, so I can think of at least 2 examples of this, and I'll focus first on the second one, I think it was the second one, on economic opportunities, and then I'll go into the governance part. And for the first one, I want to think about the tax sphere here. And so, as many of us know, a lot of the social safety net in the US, in contrast to a lot of other countries, is delivered through the tax system. And so what that means is that a lot of families, a lot of individuals receive their social safety net through the tax system. But this creates a huge barrier, particularly for many of our Latino members, particularly those that are from mixed status families or that are undocumented. And the reason is because, as you may imagine, undocumented individuals don't have a social security number. And oftentimes they have to have an equivalent number called the ITIN. The problem is that having an ITIN is actually very complicated. It requires oftentimes presenting original documents. It requires getting the documents accepted by a certified tax agent. There are very few of these agents per city, let alone rural areas. And in any case, it makes it really hard for families to access these numbers. The problem is that a lot of US-born Latinos who are American and are entitled to receiving these benefits are not allowed to receive the benefits that they are entitled to receive as a result of living in a mixed status family. That includes the child tax credit, for instance. So we know from research that a lot of children, Latino children, have missed on the tax benefit that they are entitled to receive as a result of the situation in which they live. And so really, the structure of the system is such that these children are missing on a very important opportunity that has been linked with taking families out of poverty. And for the second example about governance structures, what immediately comes to mind for me is colonias. Colonias are these communities that are located along the corridor of the US-Mexico border. And in these communities that are often unincorporated, meaning that the level of government that oversees these communities are the county level authorities, meaning they don't have a municipal authority overseeing the services and the way their community is structured locally. It goes all the way up to the county level. These communities, from a lot of research, are extremely disenfranchised. They lack essential services, such as simple things that we would think about as a water infrastructure. What that results in is that there is a complete disinvestment in this community. Folks are suffering in a number of ways: their health, their environmental hazards that they live around, housing. They're not able to capture housing opportunities which create wealth that is then transferred intergenerationally. And all of this is related directly to the structure under which they lived. And it so happens that these colonias have a majority of Latinos living in them. And so this is how, even when we think, it is very crucial that we think about how structures truly affect directly the outcomes of our Latino populations, whether that is through the political structure in the communities in which they live, or even the federal structure of the tax system, for instance.
You know, something that comes to mind when I hear you talk about this is also like the historical cultural barriers that we have to overcome, right? Many of us, my personal case, my parents' retirement plan is me, right? Like, that is it. And so when we hear, this week I got some attention about how the Social Security system is going to max out in 10 years. That did not concern my mother because I am alive and well, right? And that's a very real thing that we have to overcome, right? And so it's true, we have these structural barriers, and then we have those kinds of cultural things. And I think one of the keys to that, that's where financial literacy and education comes into place, right? So Mercedes, please, if you can talk to us a little bit about how financial literacy really can mean the difference between renting and home ownership, right? Between launching a business or always working for a business. Talk to us a little bit about how MasterCard and yourself specifically have sort of worked to advocate on
Absolutely, happy to. And thanks again for having me. And something that I do always at the very beginning is just to make sure that we all are aligned in terms of who MasterCard is. There's still people out there that think we are a credit card company and that I'm going to be pushing credit cards to everybody at the end. No, MasterCard is not a credit card company. We don't give cards to people, and we don't sign up merchants to accept payment cards. We are a global technology company that help enable and power a financial inclusion that brings digital connection to everybody everywhere. So that's our mission, to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity, the same access, et cetera. So that's mostly what we do, technology company. And you know, to answer your question, it's absolutely important and very, very basic, I would say, information and education. Because, and that you get, you know, I'm passionate about financial literacy. I have been leading MasterCard's financial education program for the last 13 years. And when you go out there to the communities and talk to people, you realize how impactful is the lack of information and the lack of financial education. And that's another thing to clarify as well, because some people think financial education, oh, you need to learn about investment and the stock market and cryptocurrency and blah, blah. No, it's not. It's the basics like budgeting, savings, preparing for an emergency, credit scoring, cybersecurity, or safety and security, to make it a little simpler. Some people hear cyber and goes like, whoa. And so that's the most important thing, and that's what we do with MasterCard's financial education program. We go to the communities and work in partnership with many national community organizations, and go to sometimes very remote places and sit down and listen to people and talk to them about these things. And you know, for us, it's such a common thing, just like, you know, doing the basics from a financial management perspective. But in these cases, no. I remember years ago that I had the pleasure of working with about 75 Mexican mothers in Los Angeles. And the train of thought was, you know, I don't have a bank account, therefore I cannot have, my only alternative is cash. I cannot have a credit card because I don't have a credit history, obviously. So what I need to do is every Friday I receive the check from my husband. He's being paid with a check. And I need to go with 2 little kids under 5 years old to a check cashing center, stand in line, cash the check. Once a month, sometimes I need to buy money orders to pay my utility bills. And I need to go to you know, one of those remittances companies to send money to my family in you know, in another country. And, but that's the only alternative I have. What else can I do? And that is far from the truth, as you all know. So we had a very nice discussion about reloadable prepaid cards, debit cards, and you know, credit cards, how they work and why they are not for everybody all the time. And they were shocked. They say, so you're telling me that I can have a payment card and I don't need to spend all this money in fees for check cashing centers, et cetera. If I have a reloadable prepaid card, I can pay my utility bills, I can receive money, I can, and it was like life-changing for many of them. So that's one of the basic information that we like to help inform people and to get you know, comfortable with those things, and the importance of having a bank account if you're going to have one or not. But if you don't, there's other alternatives as well, and it's not cash. So this cash is king. That's the first thing I start fighting with them when we get there, because that's far from what the world is today. Yeah. So empowerment starts with information and education, and creating awareness of the importance of that, and that it's not rocket science as some people think.
And really, you know, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. No. And I just wanted to add, because I agree. I mean, there's a lot of research showing that financial literacy, especially coaching, through coaching, is crucial. But it is most effective when it is coupled with structural changes, just because what is very detrimental to trust in the financial system is when folks finally understand a very complicated system, and it is very complicated. I remember when I first arrived in the US, the credit score system, it's so counterintuitive, right? You need to get debt indebt yourself in order to get more debt. That's just not something logical.
And if you cancel a credit card, it's bad for your credit score, but you
I'm
needed
still
it to get a credit score.
confused
Yeah, it's
sometimes.
crazy.
We have that class, so we had that workshop, so no problem.
So, but truly, what is really detrimental to trust in the financial system is when folks arrive, with a deep understanding of how it works and then are denied the opportunity to enter the system. And that is why all of these, important actions on financial coaching, financial literacy, can only be effective if they are coupled with structural changes at other levels as well.
Yeah, and with access.
And with access.
No, right? You get information, you get education, but you need to start using a product to understand how it works.
Exactly.
Right? So I have a bunch of
really,
examples
I think
on
the
that.
thing I would add to that is that my organization is a HUD-certified housing counseling agency, and one of the things that comes to mind for me in that is also that financial education has to be like a family affair, right? We talked about mixed immigration status households. So many young immigrants become first-time homeowners at 18 because they are the ones with the social security number, and so the parents put the name in their name, right? And so when they're older in their late 20s, 30s, and want to buy first-time home buyers, they don't qualify for first-time home buyer assistance programs because they've already bought a house, right? And it's a house for their parents. They're probably like my mom, who wants to live together forever until the end of time. But that's a very real thing. And so we can't just give. And part of it is that you want to provide that financial training at a very young age because we're starting out our careers with more debt, but also less information, and have already made financial decisions that will impact us for the next couple of decades of our lives. And so, from that, I'd like to move on a little bit until our goal in this session is to really talk about the importance of collaborative efforts between private, public, and nonprofit organizations. And so I'd love to hear how your respective organizations really approach collaboration to address these systemic barriers.
Should I go first?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
sure.
wanna start off?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and one that I love, and I love that you brought it up as well, because there's, again, I'm a researcher, so I always go back to the evidence, right? And so a lot of research has shown that actual sustainable long-term change requires the involvement of an ecosystem, right? We need all actors to work together. And then I think this is an area at which urban is moving towards also rapidly. And we're really pushing at incorporating community-engaged methodologies, community-engaged projects in a lot of our projects, increasingly. But what that means is really establishing long-term relationships with community-based organizations, with communities themselves, and not just a one-time add-on type of project just as a result of a requirement from a funder or as a result of making a study look better. And that requires effort. It requires working together with our community-based organizations, our community members, shifting a lot of the power dynamics that are inherent at the onset of a project, and that requires having accountability measures throughout the project that really ensure that those power dynamics are not being perpetuated through the project. It requires compensating for lived experience and effort just as much as we compensate for researchers for their research, right? It requires prioritizing community needs above project needs. It requires empowering and truly uplifting the voices of those populations that have been historically disenfranchised. And so really, all of these aspects need to be incorporated at every point of the research cycle, not just, as I was saying, as an add-on at the end or as an add-on and let me go interview some communities, then I go back and do my research in Washington, like you were saying, right? And so I think it's really important that from our own silos, we think about who we need to be interacting with, and the importance of also bringing the Latino communities themselves to the table, because they ultimately are the people that will know best what they need, what change they need in order to be included in the financial system. And until that happens, we won't truly eradicate these structural barriers that we've all been discussing?
Yeah.
I can just give you an example of empowerment through collaboration. COVID definitely was a rude awakening for a lot of individuals that didn't really cared or believed the importance of digital economies and electronic payments and all those things, and especially for small business owners. That's another group that we work very closely with, children from 5 years old and up, and small business owners as well. And so what we did during COVID, we worked with some issuers of cards and worked with local government in some cases to deliver stimulus funds to families in the form of a payment card. And that went together with education, because many of them say, what is this card? I don't know what to do with it. So it was an education program together with the prepaid card that they were going to receive, delivered, and in partnership with many local community organizations. This was in New York. And that's how we help empower all these people. They were sitting home. They couldn't go anywhere to cash a check, or they couldn't go to an ATM for those, that had a bank account. So that's an example of how it can be empowering, and it's having the access to the tool, having the education together with it, and really help them understand how important it is to understand how technology works this day and how to use it for their benefit.
Did you want to?
I can, if you, it's like I can. So NCRC, as I mentioned, as an national advocacy organization and a network leader, obviously there are policy advocacy that we do in partnership with our network, and that's primarily around just protecting and defending at this point. A lot of the policies that exist that support public benefits, that supports some of the resources such as these housing counseling network that we also have within our organization or among our membership, but also just ensuring that there are regulations in place that really force institutions to make meaningful investments in community. And these are the parts that are a little less sexy to talk about, right? But these are critically important to what kind of standards are in place to ensure that like banks and hospitals and them are actually driving capital to the communities who need it. So we engage with our members in advocacy to strengthen those and expand those to the extent that is possible. But we also do a lot of coalition support on the ground, because the way that those investments actually manifest on the ground is really a local, state, county, battle. And that is not our battle as a national organization. We are there to support the local coalition. And so the way that we do that is we really provide a lot of resources. So this is money, right? Like, we can't ask people that in addition to seeing clients every day that they're also waging these huge advocacy battles. Like, they need support in doing that, right? It's a separate job. So that we support them in that way as well. We also provide training. So if they need to understand the alphabet soup that exists, right? Like, where do they plug into all of this? What does this mean? How does this actually mean that my community is going to get more money or should get more money? Then that's what we're there to do, is to kind of explain the flow of capital and how it should be going into their community. And then we also talk about them as like, what are the needs that you guys have? Like, yes, theoretically, like, everyone knows the needs of their community, but like, what intervention do you guys need? Do you need an affordable housing project? Do you need transit-oriented development? What are the needs that you guys have? And then what area are you in? Like, what is the landscape looking like? Because what's going to happen in, say, San Antonio, Texas is going to be very different than what's going to happen in Baltimore, Maryland, right? So you have to understand the landscape that you're in and how to operate. What are the levers that currently exist for your projects to get funded, and what are the ones that you need to advocate for so that you can draw down on that? And so as a part of that, there is a training there. As a part of that, there's a partnership that we do, because we are not the leads in any of this. We understand that, like, the fight goes on even when we have to go back to Washington. There's an accountability piece to there too, that these institutions are accountable to the communities that they live in. They get the tax breaks, they get the tax incentives, they are benefiting from that economic power that you talked about that comes from the Latino community. They should be reinvesting that back into the community. And then We also talk about the enforcement, which goes back to the regulations, like knowing what the regulations require these institutions to do. So we really come into it from like a supportive stance of like, how can we help you navigate that? What resources do you need? And this also, whatever they need in terms of anchor engagement, we talk about carrot and stick, right? Like we want you to be able to approach that bank, hospital, whatever it is, and talk about a partnership, right? Like let's lead with a partnership, that's the carrot. But when they don't want to be a partner in the community, then you have to know how to hit them with the stick. And that's where the regulations come from. So we're also very helpful in the strategy development.
Thank you. And as a practicing organization, I can vouch for the need for organizations like Urban Institute and NCRC to really take lead on the research that then informs the programmatic work that the organization or members of your organizations are able to do. Sabrina, I'd like to sort of stay with you a bit and talk a little bit about how NCRC really ensures the inclusion of the community's sort of lived experience in the priorities of the residents and the work that NCRC takes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a great example of that is the work that we do through our community benefits agreement. So whenever a bank acquires or merges with another bank, they have to demonstrate that they have a plan for serving community needs. This goes back to the regulations. That's not as sexy to talk about, right? But they have to develop a plan, and they also have to show that there's community input in how they develop that plan. NCRC works in partnership with our members to conduct town hall meetings across the bank's footprint, so whatever geographies they located in, and we make sure that the president or CEO of that bank is in those meetings, listening to the community groups about the long list of needs that they have and how the bank can help serve them. Then after that long list of needs is created, that's when the negotiation takes place between how is the bank actually going to meet those needs. Obviously not all of them are met, right? But that becomes the standard in which they are weighted against of how well they're doing that. And once again, we are in the background supporting them like, well, this is how much they gave last year. If there's two banks becoming one bank, that means that they shouldn't be at this level. They should be at double the level because they're buying this other bank. You know, it's us helping inform them with that data so that they know how to negotiate even further. And then lastly, we also ensure that they are actually on the committees, like, you know, the consumer advisory boards for those plans and investments, so that moving forward, it's not NCRC in the room telling the banks you didn't do this right, what are you doing? It's the community saying that we haven't seen you show up in the ways that we want to. We need you to report to us on how you're doing. And so we really try to center the community needs in the discussions at the starting point of what these discussions are supposed to be looking like. We also try to make sure there's community leaders who are championing it throughout the process too.
Lisa, sort of related to that really, like what would you say are the key research questions and areas of inquiries that you really think should be prioritized in this work?
Absolutely. So I think there are three main areas that I would like to focus on, that I certainly am taking my research body of work towards. The first one is understanding that we Latine, we are not a monolith. And there's so much diversity within our community. We come from more than 30 countries. We speak different languages. We have different backgrounds. Some of us have been here a few years. Some of us have been here a very long time. Some of us were born here. We have different incomes. And all of these characteristics of each and every one of us makes our experiences, our feelings, our understandings very different. So I think we need to have more research that reflects that diversity. That means more disaggregated data, looking at how backgrounds affect different feelings and experiences, but also more attention to this diversity also from the private industry, from the public policy as well. The second one goes really into this idea of policy implementation. It's fantastic to get policies that will help our community. But truly, the next most important step is the implementation of that policy. And oftentimes what happens is that there are no more budgets for implementation, or the budget for implementation is minimum compared to the budget that was used for pushing a policy, right? And so what happens is that a lot of local agencies, local governments, or importantly, community-based organizations are the ones that are doing the work for implementing these policies. That means outreach, education, And truly, we need to have a better understanding about how to make policy implementation better, and to understand how it is limited, if it is, and how we can improve it. And the third one is related to this structural issue idea. And I'm very interested, and I think it's very important to study what I call opportunity hoarding. Opportunity hoarding is the idea that certain groups, certain communities are able to capture opportunities, resources, in a way that disenfranchises other groups, in this case, Latino communities. So I think going back to this idea of opportunity hoarding, which is a form of modern time segregation, if you will, is crucial for understanding and bridging, eliminating the structural barriers that a lot of folks in our community are facing. And so those are the three main areas of research that I want to focus on and that I think are crucial for really empowering our community.
I would like to add something to what Lisa was saying. Identifying what policies needed, developing it, and getting approvals and all of that, it's obviously very important, but implementing it, that's where the tricky thing is. And I can, put an example. I was like jumping, very happy when I heard that 16 states were mandating to have financial education in the schools, in high schools. However, as wonderful as it is, talking to the teachers and the schools and finding out that they were not given the budget to implement it or to educate the teachers, and the teachers were saying like, I'm not a financial expert, so this is wonderful. Who's going to give this class? Who's going to teach me how to do it? And the curriculum, where is it going to come from? How do I implement this? So implementation is very important, because you can have the most amazing policy or something, but if you are not able to implement it, then what's the benefit?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think many of our organizations, LEDC is also a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, and many of our organizations exist because of failed policies or intentionally discriminatory policies, right? And so we exist to fix the issues created by banks, right? Like NCRC is a leader in that, and that's the kind of work. Urban Institute provides a lot of that data that allows organizations to do that. Mercedes, I was hoping that you could share a little bit about sort of what MasterCard does to really empower the Latino community through its electronic payments technology.
Well, there's many things. One of them that I can say is MasterCard has been committed for many years, for example, to bring 1 billion, and this is global, 1 billion people into the digital economy. And we are surpassing that. Also, the same thing with support to small business owners, definitely, and bringing awareness of the importance of education, working with the banks that are our partners to have the right products to be able to target, the communities they serve. Is not the same as we were talking, I think, in the previous session, that you just think that by translating something that's going to apply to Latinos. No, that's not the case. It's not like, otherwise you just go to Google and translate and it will be terrible. But really doing research, which we're doing as well, and helping our partner banks develop the right products for the right communities, taking into consideration all of these different aspects that we have been talking about. What else can I say? Investment, definitely, in sponsoring events that give us the opportunity to bring education to the smallest communities. For example, we have a project that we started less than a year ago, which is going to rural places and listening to small business owners. It's not the same to pretend that the needs and the challenges of small businesses in big cities, in rural, are going to be the same as with rural places. So my colleague Jimmy and I, we have been to 10 different places that it took like boats and trains and automobiles and airplanes and everything to get there. It's totally worth it. And it was wonderful to to go and just listen, sit down and you know, call a round table and a group of people and just listen to them. Yeah. So hearing the needs directly, I know research and policies and all of that is wonderful, but my experience, my personal experience has been more grassroots and sitting out there in the middle of nowhere sometimes and talking to people and listening to what's needed and their perception of things, which is, that's another big thing. I don't know if you were going to touch on that later in the conversation, but as Latinos, sometimes we bring to this country these misperceptions about many things, and sometimes that's a barrier for us, because we think that banks, oh, you cannot trust banks, or banks do not like me. I need to have a lot of money to open a bank account, and they don't want me because I don't have money to put in their bank. So, you know, I need to stay away from banks, and so many other things that are totally inaccurate in many cases, and that we just came with that chip, you know, from our countries where things were different, and that, you know, gets in the way of the empowerment and how fast we could be empowered as Latinos to go straight for what we want and what we're capable of and the skills we have and everything. Sometimes it's just like, oh, no, you know, it's all blanquitos, maybe I'm a Latina, they don't want me, I don't know. So I talk to a lot of, especially of young Latinas, like one of the things that I enjoy the most, and he's talking about that, removing those things that limit us.
Yeah, I think culturally informed financial education is the key in that, right? Because Latinos in California are going to be different than Latinos in DC. They're from Central America traditionally instead of Mexico and things like that. And so even that and how you inform that is different because it's informed by different immigration policies and different lived experiences. I do want to remind everyone that we're accepting questions, and so we're going to shift to questions from you all, and I've gotten a couple, and they're great. I'm excited to not be the one to have to answer them necessarily. But we're going to start with Sabrina. So one of the questions we have is sort of how important are CDFIs in providing economic opportunities for Latino families?
Oh, I mean, it's essential. It's absolutely critical. CDFIs, and I feel like you should answer this question considering you represent a CDFI organization. But I feel like CDFIs really do a good job of actually providing capital. When I say capital, I mean like loans and things of that nature to the community in a way that a lot of big banks don't and just won't, right? They're actually really walking applicants, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's you know, a homeowner, even you know, what a personal loan. You know, they're really walking people through that process in a way that is very expensive, right? For a lot of the major banks, the same amount of money or the same process for underwriting like a $50,000 loan is very similar to like a $5 million loan, right? It still costs the same amount of money for that institution. And so because of that, a lot of the bigger banks won't touch smaller loans because they don't think that the trade-off is going to be worth it. CDFIs step in to do that work. They're like, listen, I know this entrepreneur needs like a $5,000 or $10,000 loan, so we're gonna work with them to be able to help them so they can acquire whatever it is to make their business grow. And so I think it's absolutely essential. I think that when the market is right, and some CDFIs are often in a uncomfortable position where they're trying to provide low-cost loans to their clients, and a lot of times that is dependent on the source of that capital, which goes back to holding banks accountable to providing it to the community at an affordable rate. But when that does happen, oftentimes these entrepreneurs are able to actually access that capital from CDFIs at a lower rate than they would other places. And so it's not just the access, but it's also the affordability that's really essential to CDFIs serving community. And then we talked about financial education that's culturally relevant and things. CDFIs specialize in that. They're providing their services in a very culturally relevant way, and they're reaching the community where they are. And so I think it's absolutely critical. Would you add to that?
I do want to add a point.
Yes, I feel like you.
Which is that, you know, one of the great things about CDFIs is that in many ways we're an unregulated financial institution, right? And so what that means is that we're able to adapt to the needs of our clients and our communities in a way that banks are restrained from doing or unwilling to do, right? An example of that is that most banks, or all banks, loan officers or underwriters are divided into two different roles, right? One of the reasons for that is that you don't want the loan officer's biases from knowing the client to influence the underwriting, right? The underwriting should just be sort of done neutrally, just based on numbers. At a CDFI, many CDFIs have loan officers and underwriters as a singular position. LEDC is one of them. The reason for that is that we want to be influenced by our biases of knowing this client and their lived experience, right? We want to understand the deductions they're making every month because they're sending money back to Mexico, or because they're helping to provide for their families. Like those kinds of things, we want to know that when we're underwriting and be able to adjust our pricing or our term or really the entire product to cater to that need. And that's the kind of important role that I think CDFIs have and continue to have in entrepreneurship, home ownership, and all of those paths. All right, so sort of related to that, I'm sorry, I just turned this off. All right. Mercedes, I think this would be a great question for you. Talking about cultural barriers that influence talking about and learning about financial planning.
Well, I think I mentioned a couple of the cultural barriers, and let me think. You know, the understanding of what financial education means sometimes is a barrier when you come with that chip that I mentioned in your head and think, as I said at the beginning, that, oh no, financial has to do with things for rich people, and that's complicated, and no, the banks don't want me, and these things are very complicated. So those are kind of the barriers that I have found and continue trying to overcome. The understanding that there's so many alternatives out there. I have seen how the industry and how not the industry, but how the world has changed so much in terms of the importance of financial literacy and learning digital and you know, all of those good things. Because it's a different world. And if we don't jump in this wagon, we are left behind. If people don't understand the importance of, you know, using technology to manage your money better and to save money, cost of cash is something that still I talk to people and I talk to them. Do you know that using cash has a cost? And they go like, no, why? And then we walk them through the example I gave of these ladies, you know, check cashing centers and buying money orders and transferring money, all of those things. So there is a lot of new initiatives out there. It's a lot more people than what I saw 13 years ago that are really paying attention and helping create awareness on financial education, and also more and more alternatives. Mm-hmm. There are many different new fintechs, etc., catering to Latinos, catering to minorities from different places, and finding, you know, what are the services that they need? What are the things that are important? For example, there's a partner of MasterCard called Mocafy, and they developed this debit card that reports to the credit bureaus how you pay your rent, how you pay your utility bills, how you pay a bunch of things, which hasn't been one of the basic things from the traditional way credit scoring captures your information and what forms your credit score. So that's another way of helping people. There's so many million of people that are credit worthy, but because of the system, the way things have been created, they are not getting the opportunities. So yes, there's these companies and fintechs, etc., creating products that are going to help, you know, cater to all of these markets, and including education as well, which is great.
And I think if I could add, you know, one of the things that we've noticed during the pandemic, we were handling a lot of homeowners assistance fund to keep people into their homes. And one of the unfortunate things that happened, as we know, COVID disproportionately impacted the Latino community who was still working in person. And one of the unfortunate things that we started to find in several cases was the lack of estate planning. We had situations in which older parents, grandparents were homeowners, and because of the lack of estate planning, their next of kin wasn't able to apply for some of these homeowners assistance grants. And so I think part of, you know, when we talk about the cultural barriers, it's not understanding the importance of estate planning, having that kind of conversation. And it shows up in homeownership as well as sort of an entrepreneurship, right? Like, I don't know how many of you all, but my parents were both entrepreneurs. The assumption from birth was that I would take over the family restaurant someday. There was no way I was doing that, but that was never a conversation that was had, right, until much later in life. And so I think those are the very important things that is from one generation to the next. We now have more freedom in what we choose to do, whereas before you would often just fall in line with what parents did in their line of work. So I think that came to mind. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Please.
But I was just going to add that I think here, thinking about the diversity within the community is also really important because, for instance, a lot of research and a lot of the folks that I've talked to for my research that have recently arrived in the U.S., they are, having a hard time understanding the system, for instance. And so they come from their own financial systems back in their countries where, for example, it makes sense to save money through envelopes, an envelope for going to the supermarket, an envelope for saving long term, an envelope for education and whatnot. Other folks that have been longer in the United States or maybe were born in the United States are not using those types of systems for saving and spending, may have been hurt by negative experiences with the financial system, and so they don't trust the system, and so they try to not open bank accounts. I heard several times things like, before you have a bank account, they make it all colorful, it's going to be wonderful, get your credit card, and then as soon as you get it, they never told you about the hidden fees, and then you are in debt for 20 years as a result of a small payment that you missed, right? And so really thinking about the background of who we are studying, who we are analyzing, is important because that will dictate how culture affects differently the barriers or even the experiences that we Latino folks are having with the financial system.
Amy, just to add to what you were saying about information about the state of a family and all of that, another example is like a training that we were doing together with an organization in New York, Qualitas of Life Foundation, is like being prepared for emergencies. And in this case, emergency meant being deported. And there were people that were, putting the cash under the mattress, and nobody knew in the family who had what and what it was and what bills they had and loans and things. And suddenly the father was deported and the family were like in the terrible place. And an even more dramatic situation I heard once in El Paso. An old guy, the building was burning, and the old guy was, running into the building, and the fireman was saying, "You cannot go in there." And he said, I have to. And say, "But excuse me, why? Do you have a pet or something?" And say, "No, all my life savings are under the mattress, and I will be left with nothing, so I need to go back into the building." So preparing for emergencies and understanding you have to inform your family and make your family part of the administration of the house. That's another thing we do a lot, conversation with children. Everybody has a responsibility. Turn off the light. That's going to give me more money to buy you the sneakers and whatever it is. So make all your family part of the conversation.
Yeah, completely agree. And Sabrina and Luisa, I think if you're able to answer this question, with the possibility of Social Security going away in the near future and as social safety nets are strapped for funding, what can we do to help grow intergenerational wealth for the Latino community? Are there reports we should review and can share?
Do you want to go?
Well, I feel like wealth building is such like a lifelong journey, right? It's something that you would theoretically start when you're young and you'd be able to accumulate over time. I think that for those of us who live in intergenerational households, we know that, regardless if Social Security was there or not, it's not going to be enough. It was never enough, right? And so a lot of this is about preparing in advance. And I think about a diversification of investments when I think about preparing in advance. So yes, I talked about this earlier on a panel where I feel like, home ownership is great, but it's not your destination when it comes to wealth building. It's more a part of your journey. There's so many other aspects of being financially stable or just generating wealth. And I talk about contributing to a retirement account, right? If you have a job, hopefully that job contributes or matches your contributions. You should be doing that, right? Like contributing heavily to that. This is part of the reason why people work for the government. There are pensions out there, and that's a benefit of it, right? There are investments in the stock market. Latinos are under indexed in terms of their participation in the stock market. There's so many other areas of wealth building, entrepreneurship. We talked about that too, right? And it's not to say that all of these are going to be like a silver bullet or anything like that, but the idea is that you have enough different assets so that when that time comes, you can actually liquidate that asset and it will help you take care of your family. I really agree with what Mercedes says about like it has to be a family decision. What is the family plan? Like, I'm going to be very honest with you guys. Like, me and my sister sat down. We were like, okay, you take mom, I'm taking dad. Our parents aren't together anymore. But like, you take mom, I'm taking dad. And so we are like working together to figure out like what kind of home do we need to have? What kind of like, those are the things that you kind of have to prepare in advance for. So it's definitely an uncomfortable conversation sometimes, especially when you're having it with your elders who are like, I'm not trying to talk about when I'm dead, I'm here still, but it's one of those conversations about having a plan for what that's going to look like and really working towards that plan together and trying to use all the different avenues that are available to get that done. So that's the way that I look at it. I'm sure you have other research and things like that. That would be great.
A lively conversation so far. We are delighted to have with us Congresswoman Norma Torres. She is joining us today to share some thoughts on this issue. Congresswoman Norma Torres represents California's 35th Congressional District, which includes Bloomington, Chino, Fontana, Montclair, Ontario, Pomona, and Rialto. During her time in Congress, she has worked to make sure Washington is responsive to the needs of Inland Empire residents. At the beginning of her term, she launched a job creation listening tour where she met with over 200 business owners, employees, education professionals, and local economic leaders to hear straight from the community how best to foster economic growth and create jobs in the Inland Empire. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Norma Torres.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with all of you, and thank you for being so informative with everyone here. My name is Norma Torres, and I represent California's 35th Congressional District, a district in the Inland Empire with a population that is over 64% Latino. Nationwide, Latinos make up 19% of the U.S. population, and we are the fastest growing minority group. The future, ladies and gentlemen, is Latino. It is time that we assert our presence and demand our place and in shaping policy on any issue and every issue that affects us every single day. We cannot continue to accept being the token in the room and reduced to the single issue of immigration. Yes, immigration reform is important, and it is something that we will continue to work on hopefully next year when we are in the majority, we Democrats. But we need to also dominate in every space on every issue. The fact is, the deck is stacked up against us. First-generation immigrants like myself are often playing catch-up or trying to overcome language barriers. So whether it's basic financial literacy, like building credit or building family wealth, by starting a business or purchasing your first home, few of us are starting from a place of generational wealth. And with that comes many financial barriers. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee and a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I am committed to delivering resources for Latino families in my district and throughout the nation, so that we can succeed and take those first key steps toward building generational wealth. One of my top priorities is to improve our transportation systems and expand affordable housing. Everyone deserves to live in a safe, affordable, and quality home. This is the foundation of stability, wealth building, and economic empowerment. Yet, the reality for so many Latino families is that the most affordable options include renting or living in multi-generational housing. That's why I continue to advocate for funding to meet the needs of our young community, and why I am carving out a space to be a voice for us on housing and infrastructure issues on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for federal funding of all programs. For some of you, consider it like the checkbook. For others in the room, it's like your personal Zelle account. Just a few years ago, I secured a transit-oriented development pilot program through the appropriations process. Specifically, this program forces HUD and DOT to work together to make sure that we are building affordable housing near and accessible to transit lines, so those who need transportation are living right where it is. Just last month, I attended the Brightline West groundbreaking, the West's first high-speed rail train that will connect Las Vegas, Nevada to my district, Rancho Cucamonga, in just about 2 hours and 10 minutes. This is a $12 billion public-private partnership to build a high-speed rail line, and it is an investment in the Inland Empire that will create thousands of good-paying jobs, union jobs, in my region and across Southern California and Nevada. And as the Latino community continues to grow, we must be more than just present in spaces discussing the future of our built environment, from housing to infrastructure to schools and small businesses. I am asking all of you to take every opportunity to engage with our state and local leaders, remind our cities to apply for local funding, and take advantage of any opportunity to meet the needs of our individual communities. Remember, lead in every sector, because you are our country's future. And by leading, I don't mean on the sidelines cheering for someone else. I mean you taking the ropes and forcing yourself to a leadership position. We need to help Latino entrepreneurs learn about and gain access to small business loans. We also need to ensure that we are supporting Latino-owned businesses to win our fair share of major construction contracts. Representation in every industry, public or private, truly matters in construction and in any other field. That is why I want to thank CHCI for organizing this summit and bringing together national leaders, elected officials, policymakers, influencers renowned for their vision, expertise, and influence in public, private, and nonprofit sectors. So let's all continue to provide opportunities for high school and college students to gain work experience through internships and fellowships in our offices. I, for example, run a youth advisory committee in my district office. This YAC committee working group is also responsible for being a part of my paid internship program in my office, both in DC and my local office. And as a result, 25% of my staff comes from that youth advisory committee. So I'm very, very proud of that. And so many of us in the corporate world and the private and public sectors can do that for the next generation coming up. So let's work together to continue to achieve, not just for ourselves, but for all of our communities. Thank you to all of you for taking the first step at being at this great event and sharing your stories with the rest of the young people that need to hear that sí se puede. Thank you all.
And now we're going to do a very Washington thing. Because the Congresswoman has to take votes, we're going to take a quick group photo, and then we'll continue the panel. She's got to run back up on the hill. We're going to continue the panel in 2 seconds. We're going to take a photo.
That was definitely a planned visit, so no worries there. And I know there's no greater responsibility when you're the final panel before a reception than to end on time. So what we will really finalize here, a couple of people asked what advice you have for people in their 20s to ensure that they have a better, healthier financial well-being than their prior generation. So if each of you would like to have some parting words of advice.
I think rely on your community. I think we've been talking a lot about barriers, about structural issues, and I always like to end in a positive note. We are a wonderful community. We like to help each other. That is what we are known for, right? And so rely on the networks. Relay what you do know. Relay your positive experiences. If you know about a financial education program, or a coaching program, tell folks around you. Try to, use your resources for bettering the community. Work with community organizations if you can, and truly, rely on this wonderful group that we are. And it's not all negative. There are a lot of positives as well. And so that's what the advice that I would give.
I would say definitely think about what your goals are and really inform yourself so that you can develop a plan to get there, and that's going to include a variety of things. And I would say tap into that inner resiliency, because just because it may be difficult or the road may be winding doesn't mean that you can't get there. We know that there are systemic barriers at play, but we also know that there's a network of institutions out there that are also there to help you navigate that. And so I would say that, Latinos, we are very, resilient people. And so you have that in you, and to continue to just move forward and stay disciplined about it.
And I would just invite all of you to please help us bring awareness of the importance and the big impact that financial education and education on everything. The tools are out there. We just need to make the time. We know where everybody's busy, and especially, underserved communities are working like crazy, and small business owners as well. But the importance is, it's really, the impact that it has in your life. So I would just say, help us bring awareness since people are very young. It's important to grow up knowing how that it's necessary to know so many things. So
thank you. And my selfish plug is that one of my biggest recommendations is to really connect with community organizations like LEDC and others who are members of NCRC, Unidos, these housing counseling agencies and entrepreneurship organizations, CDFIs, many of which. I think it's an incredible opportunity to start a career in that path or to transfer into the nonprofit sector and really get that boots on the ground experience. We have certain events throughout the month where we'll require sort of all of our staff to participate in seeing clients so that they have those faces, those names to the stories and numbers that we're looking through to work with, right? This is the kind of information that informs the work that all of our organizations are doing. So I want to thank CHCI for inviting us and organizing this panel. It's been an incredible discussion. And so thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much, Emmy. Thank you to this wonderful panel. And I agree with Emmy also, the toughest place to be is between the audience and the reception. So I'm going to be very, very brief. I just want to thank you all for being here with us for this incredible discussion. I want to thank these panelists and our moderator for this incredible discussion, which I think, again, I'm glad that you ended on a positive note because there is so much potential. There is so much opportunity. There is so much we can do. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but we have what we need to get there. And so it's just a matter of putting our efforts together and overcoming the barriers that still stand in front of us. And I want to thank you for joining us for the last 2 days, as this is our last formal programming opportunity. I want to thank our sponsors, our partners for their generous support and commitment to CHCI, both today and yesterday and throughout the year. And for sponsoring this issue summit, especially our champion sponsors, Amazon, Amgen, and MasterCard, who in addition to being a champion sponsor, sponsored this closing session. I want to thank all of our speakers, all of our panelists, all of our moderators for leading such insightful and engaging conversations. I want to thank all of the members of Congress who joined us over these last couple of days and gave their thoughts and perspectives. And I want to thank each of you for being here. I want to thank you for doing your part to help further our mission of developing the next generation of Latino leaders, of helping our community advance, of helping us tackle the issues that we confront and that confront the nation. And finally, I want to thank the CHCI Board of Directors and the Advisory Council for their leadership. And I want to ask you all if you could please join me in thanking the incredible CHCI staff who do all the heavy lifting to put together a convening like this. If you've enjoyed any part of today's and yesterday's Issue Summit, it's thanks to their extraordinary dedication and hard work. You can continue to stay in touch with us and to continue all of these conversations and to continue to bring attention to all of these issues by engaging with us on social media. We are at CHCI on all of the major platforms and at CHCI DC on Instagram. And although the formal sessions program portion of the summit is over, the summit itself is not over, so please join us right outside at our networking reception, sponsored by Affirm, where we'll have some refreshments and you can continue to network, build relationships, and help move our community forward. Have a good afternoon.